corridor was collapsing behind them. Sergeant Wyatt Stenholm didn't waste time looking back. He grabbed the collar of the nearest engineer, yanked him through the blast doors, and slammed his fist into the emergency seal. A hiss of pressure. The wall behind them buckled inward as the gravitational collapse swallowed the hallway like a crumpling paper tube. "Keep moving!" Wyatt barked, shoving the group forward through flickering lights and waves of heat that pulsed from the walls. Dock 7 is still intact. 15 engineers sprinted ahead, covered in soot and blood. Some had burns across their arms. Others clutched data drives like lifelines. Wyatt had seen combat. He'd seen orbital bombardment. But this was something else. The sky above LSR wasn't burning. It was folding. Through the cracked dome overhead, they saw the Orzal's weapon, thick as a city block, blackened with heat scars and pulsing with light. It hovered in low orbit, and every few minutes it sighed. No beam, no sound, just a pulse, and a section of the colony was gone. Buildings turned to vapor, roads twisted into corkscrews of molten steel. Human bodies vanished like dust in wind. He activated his comm. "Control, this is Sergeant Stenholm." "Status on the Templar?" A pause, then docked. "Engines at 68%, 800 seats, that's it." Wyatt spat. "Copy. Prioritize engineers. No security detail. They don't need protection if we don't have people to rebuild." Behind him, the ground buckled. A new wave of distortion, hot, invisible, rippled through the complex. One of the engineers screamed as her legs snapped backward at unnatural angles. Blood misted the air as internal pressure inverted around them. Wyatt yanked her limp body over his shoulder and kept moving. Ahead, the loading bay doors cracked open. The Templar, an older Nova class with aging hull plates, trembled on its stabilizers as it fought the growing pull from above. A klaxon screamed. The weapon fired again. From the window slit, Wyatt watched as all of Sector 12 vanished. Just disappeared. The space it had occupied now shimmered with waves of collapsed gravity and plasma. A column of vapor punched skyward as secondary explosions rippled from underground power stations. The Templar lifted off. Engines flared, straining, hull rattling. At 10,000 meters, the sky twisted. At 15,000, space itself warped. At 19,000, a gravitational knot wrapped around the lifter like a noose. The hull imploded. 800 engineers died without a scream. Nothing fell. Just particles, sparks, a memory erased. Wyatt turned from the viewport. He wanted to curse. He wanted to scream. But there were still 20 engineers behind him, still people to move. The UEDF's forward base crumbled as they ran. The main dome was split open like a cracked egg, its contents, people, computers, fragments of lives, bleeding into the vacuum. Some tried to crawl toward the escape tubes. Others just stared up, wide-eyed, as the sky folded one last time. It wasn't war, it was erasure, and the galaxy was watching. Every bit of it was being streamed, not by Earth, not by survivors, by the Orzal. Across Orzal ships in multiple systems, soldiers gathered around tall, curved holograms, displaying the destruction in real time. Their war hymns thumped like a tribal beat over the feed as they laughed, bet credits on the next impact zone, and mimicked human screams for sport. The Orzal were grotesque and brutal, their bodies plated in segmented bone-colored exoskeletons veined with blue plasma channels. Their faces were elongated, eyeless, split down the center by rows of mandibles that clicked in rhythm when they laughed. Some wore the jawbones of dead enemies as trophies. Others adorned their armor with human rib cages strung like necklaces. One commander stood tall, arms outstretched, as images of the Templar implosion played on loop behind him. A roar of laughter erupted when a slow-motion replay showed a small child slamming against a viewport milliseconds before the ship collapsed inward. Screens filled with Orzal memes, digitally edited clips of LSR's destruction layered with mockery. One popular image showed an Orzal performing a grotesque dance beside a still frame of dismembered humans floating through shattered domes. The caption read, For what purpose does a human exist, if not to be erased with elegance? Another showed an animated version of Earth, shaking with fear, labeled the Coward Planet. The streams went viral across dozens of systems. Even species unaffiliated with the Orzal tuned in. Some watched in silence. Others smirked. The Galactic Council chamber remained dark. No formal session was called, not even a condemnation. No envoy, no sanction, just silence. Some member species issued soft-worded statements of concern, but none dared confront the Orzal directly. Their warriors were too many, their expansion too rapid. LSR, it seemed, had simply been in the way. On Europa, buried beneath the icy crust of Jupiter's moon, Earth's military command sat in silence. The war room was cold and dim. Holograms buzzed silently over the table, tactical displays, casualty estimates, live feeds that froze one by one. Admiral Corbin Jourdain stood at the center. His hands rested on the steel table. His face was stone. General Eamon Russo paced slowly at the edge of the room, jaw clenched so tight it looked carved in granite. They said nothing. A young officer entered, eyes wide with panic. "Sir, incoming comms from—" "Leave it," Jourdain said. His voice was calm, final. Another screen flickered on. More laughter. This time, an Orzal mock broadcast, dressed in stolen UEDF uniforms, their bulbous limbs stretching the fabric, pretending to call for help as digital flames animated in the background. Someone in the room cursed under their breath. Director Malcolm Leonard, head of UEDF intelligence, leaned forward slowly. "How many confirmed dead?" "Estimates pass 15,000, the AI responded coldly. "Includes 91% of LSR's engineering division. All command staff, most civilians. 17 escape pods unaccounted." Jourdain didn't blink. "Any military presence remaining?" "Scattered, broken, no coordinated resistance." The lights dimmed further. Only the feed of floating bodies remained, some frozen in place, others slowly drifting through the shattered remains of what had once been an arcology dome. One soldier still clutched his rifle. Another, a woman, hung upside down, mouth open in a silent scream. Leonard swallowed hard. "They broadcast it like sport," he said. No one replied. "Laughing while they burn engineers alive." Still nothing. Jourdain finally looked up. His eyes were sharp, cold. "Archive it." Russo blinked. "Sir?" "All of it. Every transmission, every insult, every laugh. I want it on every server, every satellite. We don't bury this. We remember it." "But the Council's silence is an answer." Leonard nodded. "What about the directive?" A pause. A tremor ran through the room, deep, mechanical, ancient. Jourdain turned away from the table. "Not yet." The young officer who had returned moments earlier looked up, hesitant. "Admiral, what if they come again?" Jourdain didn't turn around. His voice dropped. "They won't come again." Silence. He stepped toward the side console and keyed in a sequence. A restricted folder appeared, one locked for over a century. The logo that emerged wasn't standard UEDF. It was older, angular, forgotten. Faint red letters shimmered across the holographic surface. "Directive Feral. Access restricted." Leonard raised his head slowly. "You're not serious." Jourdain didn't answer. Outside the war room, the frozen ocean of Europa groaned with tectonic pressure. And beneath the ice, something ancient stirred. Something Earth had never truly decommissioned. Not forgotten, not forgiven. Just waiting. The steel door to Tharsis Command hissed shut behind General Eamon Russo as he stepped into the war chamber, boots echoing over polished alloy. The lights were dim. Shadows clung to the edges of the room. On the central holotable, a three-dimensional map of LSR still flickered, charred and fragmented, like the memory of a city torn apart in slow motion. Admiral Corbin Jourdain stood on the opposite side, arms crossed, his stare fixed on the projection of orbital wreckage. "The Council hasn't responded," Russo said, voice low. Corbin didn't look at him. "They won't." Behind them, more officers filed in. Malcolm Leonard, head of strategic intelligence, adjusted his collar and sat near the display. A silent female technician handed him a datapad without speaking. Her eyes were swollen, red from crying. A notification pinged. Diplomatic transmission received. Russo opened it on the side panel. The display filled with a distorted Orzal comm. A dozen of them appeared. Tall, six-limbed monstrosities, spined and plated, with long jaws and protruding ocular nodules along their upper mandibles. Their skin shimmered like scorched metal, shades of bronze and black under shifting artificial light. They were dancing. To a tribal drumbeat, the Orzal twirled in mockery. Dead humans, digitally edited, dismembered, stylized, were arranged like decorations around them. A glowing title scrolled across the bottom: "Our art, their purpose." One Orzal turned to face the camera and said, with digitized sarcasm, "Humans should thank us. We gave their deaths rhythm." Malcolm Leonard slammed the datapad onto the table. "They sent this as a response." "That's their diplomacy," Russo muttered. Corbin didn't blink. He turned away from the screen and walked to the far console. With a biometric scan, a red-locked sequence illuminated the wall. One word hovered in silence: "Feral." The room went still. General Yance Melgrave, older than the rest, cleared his throat. "You're not seriously considering that protocol. It was shut down a century ago for a reason." "No," Jourdan replied. "It was stored, not forgotten." "This is a declaration of total war," Russo said, almost to himself. "The moment we go down that path, there's no coming back." "They already vaporized 15,000 of ours," Malcolm snapped. "Without provocation, without warning." "Think, damn it," Melgrave barked. "You want the rest of the galaxy to see us as monsters? We'll be no better than—" "We're not here to perform for the galaxy," Jourdan said. His voice was quiet, precise. "We're here to survive it." He pressed his palm to the panel. Feral protocol, engaged. Sirens didn't wail, no alarms, just the grinding of metal beneath their feet, the distant shift of subterranean locks disengaging. Beneath the ice, in the frozen caverns of Tharsis Base, something massive began to stir. A flash of red filled the hollow table, expanding outward. The war machines were waking up. They hadn't been seen in over a century, not since the Krellin uprisings along the Titan corridors. Even then, they were used sparingly. Now, after 142 years of silence, the bays that held them opened with groaning defiance. Massive gantries disengaged, platforms rotated. Under floodlights, they rose. Two-story monoliths of steel and polymer titanium composites, each one painted in muted combat grays, embedded with patches of old campaign markings and fresh alloy welds. Their forms resembled humanoid giants, but refined, every limb designed for function, every armor plate interlocking with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Heads compact, sensor arrays hidden behind polarized visors. These weren't robots. They were vengeance given shape. In the observation deck above Base 6, Damon Briggs stood alone. His face was lined with old scars and the permanent tension of someone who'd survived one war too many. The officers behind the glass spoke in hushed tones, but Briggs didn't look back. His eyes were fixed on the machine rising in front of him. Baylor 66. 2 decades in deep vault stasis, left out of military records, no press coverage, no retirement honors. And yet here it was, reactivated not just by command, but by necessity. Technicians in black exosuits swarmed its base, running diagnostics. Sparks flew as old coupling units were replaced. Engineers spoke in short, tense bursts. From beneath the machine's primary chest armor, a triangular emblem glowed faintly. An old UEDF logo partially scorched, almost erased. Briggs descended the catwalk toward the operations pit. His boots clanged against the metal grate. Everyone stopped talking when they saw him. "Is it ready?" he asked. One of the engineers, a younger man named Felix Sado, gave a curt nod. She's been dormant too long. We're rebuilding the AI matrix now. But the shell, sir? The chassis? Still runs hot. A sharp metallic exhale burst from Baylor's rear exhaust vents, like the machine itself had sighed. Good, Briggs said. Let me know when she's listening. Upstairs, in the adjoining conference room, the debate raged. We're pushing unstable code into unstable machines, argued Dr. Rulian Miles, lead AI scientist. You think the Orzal are monsters? Wait until one of these miscalculates orbital velocity and puts a city into the sea. We're not putting them on patrol, Malcolm Leonard said, hands on the table. They're going straight into the worst hellholes we can find, and they won't come back unless everything's ash. Even so, Miles insisted, tapping on his datapad, adaptive combat AI isn't just about tactics. It learns behavior. We feed it patterns of brutality, it becomes brutality. And, said Russo coldly, you think this is still about restraint? Corbin Jourdain raised his eyes from the console. Give them the upgrades, he said. No overrides, just fail-safes, nothing remote. Then it's all on the pilots. Exactly, Corbin replied. Let's see what happens when humanity stops apologizing. Back in Bay 6, Baylor 66's systems flickered to life. Lights crawled along its limbs. Core servos adjusted posture. Micro-hydraulics hissed. Briggs stood at its feet, helmet in hand. His voice was low, meant only for himself. Time to go to work. He climbed the loading gantry. The hatch opened with a deep, chest-rattling groan. Inside, the cockpit lit up in waves of red and gold, a dozen systems booting in sequence. The seat molded to his frame like an old memory. The AI spoke, flat and mechanical. Pilot recognized, Damon Briggs. Authorization, Ferox Prime. He strapped in. As the clamps locked into place and the cockpit sealed around him, the silence was complete. Not the stillness of peace. The silence before thunder. The sky over Thalax fractured without warning. Sensors blinked. Communications cut to static. Every Orzal array on the surface went dark in a 3-second sweep. No missiles, no ships, no signatures. Just white noise, then silence, then the tremors. Base Commander Drezak grunted as his third knee buckled. A 6-limbed brute with scarred plating and a cybernetic crest bolted to his upper spine, he stood inside the Thalax primary command dome. Seismic shift? Report. No answer. All monitors flashed glyphs of confusion. Outposts 2, 6, and 9, silent. Drone feeds, gone. Atmospheric readouts dropped to null. Then came the sound. Not an explosion, not engines. It was metal, rhythmic, deliberate. Boom, boom, boom. From the southern ridge, shadowed figures emerged, colossal, humanoid, gleaming with blackened steel and matte ceramic plating. They didn't descend. They marched. Their silhouettes eclipsed the low suns behind them. The war machines had arrived. Briggs led them. Baylor 66 moved with precision, not grace. Every step was a blow to the land itself. His HUD pulsed crimson, static flickering in the corner of his vision. Thalax's orbital jammers were active, but it didn't matter. They weren't here to talk. They were here to show something permanent. The first Orzal defense line opened fire with plasma mortars and arc turrets. A storm of blue energy washed over the lead war machines. It slowed them by seconds, maybe less. Briggs adjusted targeting manually. The Baylor's right arm rotated forward, locking into a high-velocity kinetic driver. His thumb pressed once on the trigger. A tower, 3 stories tall, command spire, vanished in a single shot. The impact vaporized the upper half. Debris flew backward in a horizontal line. Inside the base, alarms screamed in 2 languages before dying out. Orzal troops scrambled to reposition. Orders were shouted. Drones deployed. The second war machine entered the fray, Nimrod 23, piloted by Lieutenant Jackson Meyer. Its left arm deployed a high-yield EMP flail that crackled with coiled voltage. He brought it down on a forward barracks dome. The structure collapsed inward like a soda can. A wave of Orzal infantry fled in every direction. Some fired. Some dropped weapons and ran. One stood still, claws raised, chest exposed in surrender. His armor bore no weapons, just rank insignia, likely a comms tech or quartermaster. He shouted in distorted high Orzal, "Yield! I yield! I—" Baylor's foot landed on him mid-sentence. The earth shook. Inside the cockpit, Briggs said nothing. The war machines didn't advance in a line. They broke apart, hitting flanks, collapsing infrastructure, disrupting every known Orzal tactic. Every time a command spire lit up, it was gone seconds later. Every bunker door opened, was sealed behind retreating soldiers, then burst open again from above as limbs of alloy tore through the structure like soft clay. They didn't broadcast. They didn't announce. They just showed up. One of the outer storage depots tried to launch a recon drone. Baylor caught it midair with a magnetic whip and smashed it into the dome like a hammer to glass. From the upper ridgeline, an Orzal flight commander screamed for orbital evac. "All wings retreat. Initiate burn. We are not prepared for—" The ground beneath him erupted. A war machine, unnamed, launched from beneath the ridge on repulsor jets and shoulder-slammed the tower off its base. 3 Orzal pilots, still inside, were flung like insects. Inside the Thalax primary dome, Commander Drezak watched as the command tower, once the base's symbol of dominance, was pried open by Baylor 66 like a can lid. The mecha's arms reached forward, locked onto the structure's upper shell, and peeled. Screams echoed across open comms. A dozen Orzal soldiers scrambled out, half of them on fire, the others dragging wounded. Baylor didn't move. It stood over the tower like a judge over a corpse. Then, Briggs triggered the sonic array. Every Orzal comms frequency lit up with a single audio burst, human laughter, distorted, cold, followed by static. The surviving Orzal, who heard it, stopped, froze. Then Baylor waited. It stood still, letting them see what came next. From the scattered ruins of the forward dome, another war machine dragged wreckage toward the square. Bent beams, twisted armor, shattered drone cores, and the limbs of Orzal dead. It didn't speak. It just built. In less than 5 minutes, a structure formed in the open yard. A sculpture, 20 meters tall, arched like a spine, made of Orzal plating fused with bone and alloy. At its base, 5 helmets impaled on stakes. At its center, a crucified drone carrier, arms outstretched, filled with holes like ritual offerings. And on the structure's face, painted in human blood, carved with plasma torches. Elisar smiled first. No one ordered that. No protocol dictated it. The war machine pilots just did it. An Orzal scout spotted the message, gasped in his comm, and dropped his weapon. Inside a collapsed corridor under the southern defense wall, General Vargak, commander of Thalax planetary forces, was found trembling, half buried in debris. His exoskeleton cracked, face scorched by electrical feedback. Medical officers tried to extract him. They found something etched into his armor, deep, carved like it had been done with a blade, not a tool. Elisar smiled first. His mandibles clicked uncontrollably. When asked for identification, he repeated one phrase: "They do not broadcast, they arrive." By nightfall, Thalax base was gone. Not destroyed, erased. There was no central structure, no command line, no sense of continuity. The terrain looked like a battlefield drawn by a lunatic, a mix of strategic obliteration and psychological warfare. No one celebrated. Briggs exited Baylor near the edge of a melted crater, helmet tucked under his arm, the metal around him still glowing red. He stared at the field of smoke and flame. No words. Just the crackle of cooling steel and the far-off howl of Orzal wounded being dragged to bunkers. He turned to the comms tech waiting nearby. "Send it." "Sir?" Briggs didn't turn his head. Let the bastards know what fear feels like. Baylor 66's arm buckled as a barrage of plasma slugs tore across its left flank. Damon Briggs gritted his teeth and redirected power from auxiliary systems to the lower servos. The machine stumbled, caught its balance, and rose again through the smoke-choked battlefield of Thalax's northern sprawl. They had returned, and this time, the Orzal weren't retreating. 2 kilometers out, twin towers unfolded into artillery platforms, auto-targeting with synchronized precision. Red targeting lines scanned the terrain in wide arcs, painting the war machines with predictive fire patterns. Lieutenant Jackson Myers' Nimrod 23 ducked behind a fractured ore processor before vaulting out and unleashing a concentrated EMP burst. One turret flickered, jammed. The other recalibrated, split its aim, and struck Nimrod's shoulder plate clean off. "Adapted firing logic!" Myers shouted over comms. "They're pre-mirroring our maneuvers before we commit." Briggs didn't answer. He was already moving. From behind the hill crest, a swarm of drone units emerged. Sleek, insectoid machines the size of grav bikes, coated in reactive carapace plating that shimmered in dark bronze and gold. Each drone had 4 thin wings and a triple-barreled plasma stinger mounted beneath its frame. They hit hard. 2 war machines dropped their energy shields in the wrong sequence. The drones dove straight into weak points and detonated in coordinated suicide strikes. The ground ruptured. One mech's head module spun wildly before crashing to the earth like a crushed insect. Briggs took control of an adjacent AA turret with Baylor's hacking spike, redirected its fire, and cleared the skies. But it wasn't enough. Thalax had changed. The Orzal had studied every move, every strike vector. No longer disorganized, their defense grid pulsed with digital coherence. The battle raged for 4 hours. Then silence. Preka 4 came next. The desert world, once thought defenseless, lit up with artificial gravitational nodes embedded in the ground, unknown to the UEDF. When Captain Stroud's war machine, Cerberus 91, advanced toward the mining arcology, the sand beneath him buckled. Briggs listened in horror as the gravity reversed. A column of blue-white energy collapsed the space around Cerberus's core. The mech imploded mid-motion, as if crushed by a fist from beneath. The pilot didn't eject. Couldn't. Static. Then nothing. UEDF command logged it as a total loss. They didn't know what else had been lost. In the dead silence that followed, Orzal recovery teams swarmed the crash site, shielded in heavy exo-crawlers, supported by psychic stabilizers and electromagnetic fields to contain the volatile debris. They moved with haste. Cerberus 91's cockpit had been pulverized, but the AI core survived. So did most of the motor cortex and neurosync array. They weren't after the pilot. They were after the machine. The war machine's remains were loaded into a transport, sealed in a refractive carrier chamber, and shipped off-world to an Orzal installation on the dark side of Aketros 5, a moon blanketed in ion fog and cloaked from UEDF sensor nets. Inside a subterranean complex carved into the planet's iron crust, Orzal engineers began the process. Their lead genetic architect, High Strategist Vezerak, a towering, hunched figure with elongated mandibles and twin ocular crests running down his spine, overlooked the operation personally. His speech buzzed across the labs. "Do not disassemble blindly. We must learn how it learns, not just what." Cerberus's systems were peeled open layer by layer, logs replayed in reverse. Simulations ran in real time. Combat patterns were visualized as kinetic threads across holomaps. Every twitch, every micro-adjustment made by the human pilot was translated into data points. One segment drew particular attention. Baylor 66's engagement logs. During a skirmish 2 missions earlier, Cerberus and Baylor had operated in sync. They had used a flanking maneuver not seen in any standard UEDF protocol. Instead of pressing the advantage, they baited a fallback route, allowed the Orzal squad to regroup, and then used heat plume readings to predict their counter-thrusts. It wasn't tactical programming. It was instinct. The Orzal didn't understand it, so they copied it. Vezerak loaded the neuromotor profiles of Damon Briggs into a mimic AI. He watched the recorded inputs, analyzing delays, reflexes, corrections. He corrects mid-motion, anticipates without waiting for error. He does not react. He chooses. Then came replication. Bipedal frames were built, Not exact replicas, but mirrors. Mechs shaped in the same silhouette, using salvaged human alloys and adjusted to Orzal neural patterns. They weren't perfect, but they were learning, and the humans had no idea. Briggs, meanwhile, was operating behind enemy lines. After Preka 4, he stopped moving with the main units. Too slow, too predictable. He and Baylor began striking soft targets alone. Relay stations, supply crawlers, orbital downlinks. No patterns, no announcement. He didn't wait for approval. On Zexier Delta, he burst through a volcanic ridge to destroy an atmospheric converter, cutting breathable air to 3 Orzal garrisons. On Kara's Maw, he hacked a signal relay, inserted false coordinates, and lured an Orzal strike fleet into their own minefield. Each time, he vanished. Each time they tried to track him. But Baylor's stealth net had been upgraded. Thermal dampeners, passive hull refractors, and Briggs' own navigation made detection nearly impossible. Still, it wasn't perfect. During a mission on a frozen gas harvest ring, Briggs had to cut power for 9 hours to avoid drone patrols. He stayed inside Baylor the whole time, breath fogging in the cold cockpit, reading logs from the dead. Remembering. War wasn't clean anymore. It was a chase, and the Orzal had started to understand it. Briggs watched their response tighten. Patrols stopped moving in squads. They started hunting in formations shaped like pincers. They laid traps, mines that activated on motionless metal, orbital jammers that echoed his own comm frequencies back at him to disrupt field triangulation. It became a dance. Step forward, step back, hunter, prey, prey, hunter. And somewhere deep inside him, Briggs began to suspect. They're not just reacting anymore. They're watching. The first surge hit Baylor 66 like a fist made of static and fire. Damon Briggs slammed his fist into the side panel as the cockpit lights flickered, dimmed, and finally died. A screech tore through his earpiece as the storm outside intensified, ion winds howling through the fractured canyons of Nebrian like the planet itself was screaming. Inside Baylor, systems buckled. The HUD blinked, lines of corrupted code scrolling in reverse. Then nothing. Total blackout. The storm was artificial. He knew that now. The Orzal hadn't just modified their drones or their battlefield formations. They had engineered the storm, seeded ionizing particles into the upper stratosphere, then detonated them in tandem with magnetosphere spikes. The result? A rolling tide of electromagnetic chaos that scrambled every signal, every AI circuit, every bit of predictive tech the war machines relied on. Baylor 66 was blind, and Damon Briggs was alone. He exhaled slowly. Cold air stung his throat. The cockpit had dropped in temperature by 10 degrees in less than a minute. The only light came from a single manual switchback, flickering dull yellow from the control column. He reached down, disconnected the AI unit. Click. The hum that had always been there, beneath the engines, beneath the servos, beneath the silence, was gone. Baylor had been a beast with a soul. Now, it was just steel. Briggs curled his hands around the controls. No HUD, no threat analysis. Just vibration, instinct, and the faint rising pulse of adrenaline. He moved. Baylor responded with hesitation. The joints groaned, but it moved, like waking up from a coma. Outside, visibility was nearly zero. Dust, ion mist, shadows. He guided Baylor through the gorge slowly, each step deliberate. The storm clawed at the mech's limbs, pushing sideways with winds powerful enough to peel armor. And then, movement. Briggs caught the blur just in time. An Orzal ambush unit, a spider-shaped mech with plasma-laced legs and a cranial disruptor mounted on its back, leapt from the canyon wall. He didn't think. He twisted Baylor's left arm upward, caught the unit mid-air, and slammed it to the ground with a sound like thunder colliding with bone. Sparks erupted. Plasma spewed from its mouthpiece. One of its legs twitched violently. He didn't stop. Briggs brought Baylor's arm down again, and again, and again. No targeting system. No trajectory analysis, just rage and weight. The Orzal were watching. Somewhere above, on their black ships hidden behind the ion haze, they saw the kill with no precision, no logic, just human will. And they flinched. When Briggs finally emerged from the gorge, blackened, scorched, moving like a wounded predator, he didn't call for evac. He walked Baylor across the ridge and broadcast a single message across all UEDF encrypted channels. Shut them off. All of them. It took 12 minutes before the first pilot responded. Captain Thomas Dakharov, commanding Phalanx 02, hesitated. "Sir, without AI support." "They've turned the field against us," Briggs replied, voice dry. "Turn it back." Dakharov hesitated, then obeyed. More followed. One by one, the war machines silenced their companions. No more overlays, no more guidance, just instinct and motion. Some pilots struggled. Lieutenant Dresner, barely 2 missions into deployment, froze when his mech refused to stabilize during a cliffside drop. No AI meant no balance correction. He panicked, overcorrected, and slipped. Phalanx 07 tumbled 40 meters down a ravine, hit a protruding outcrop, and would have exploded, if not for Briggs catching the falling mech by its shoulder mount and dragging it out manually, meter by meter, like a hunter pulling a wounded dog from a fire. No one questioned the order after that. And then, something changed. Without AI calibration, the machines became unpredictable. The Orzal countermeasures, magnetic pulses, trap fields, feedback drones, relied on algorithmic forecasting. Without those patterns, they couldn't keep up. The war machines became faster, meaner, almost alive. Baylor 66 no longer moved like a machine. It stalked across ridgelines with low, crouching gaits. Its head swiveled more sharply. Its motions didn't follow battlefield logic. They followed Briggs. On Turnak Drift, he lured 3 Orzal Walker units into a pass and disabled all of them in under 90 seconds using only terrain advantage, gravity, and melee impact. No shots fired, no data shared. By the end of that battle, his arms were shaking from the physical strain. The cockpit was filled with condensation and oil vapor. His shirt clung to his chest. Every muscle screamed. He smiled. So did the others. After the operation, the war machine hangar reeked of scorched metal and sweat. Pilots climbed out of their cockpits, some limping, some bruised, but all breathing. They looked at each other like something sacred had been broken, and something stronger had taken its place. They didn't cheer. They just nodded and smiled. At Tharsis Command, analysts worked through the night, manually. Without AI sorting algorithms, they dug through raw transmissions, old data cores, and half-buried logs from previous missions. One of them, Ensign Jonah Voigt, working solo through backup clusters, found something, faint, fragmented, buried under static from the LSR transmissions. A voice, cracked, whispering, human. "We're still down here. We didn't die." He froze, pulled the thread. Another message. Distorted but intelligible. Names, ID tags, audio clips recorded during seismic quakes, partial biosigns, emergency beacon flares, sent in patterns too weak to trip major systems. They were from LSR, below the surface. Weeks old, ignored by automated review. Voigt contacted Malcolm Leonard. Within the hour, Jourdain authorized a reconnaissance unit. Briggs was already en route before they finished the briefing. He didn't ask permission, didn't need it. He knew what they'd find. The voice cracked through the static like a whisper underwater. "I know this won't reach anyone, but if it does, Mom, Dad, I didn't run. I stayed. We all stayed. We tried to hold the lower corridor. I hope someone remembers us." The voice belonged to Engineer Colin Bray, 28, civilian systems technician, last assigned to Reactor Substation Gamma on LSR. The recording had been embedded in a scrambled data burst, partially overwritten by radiation noise and seismic interference. It had never been sent. but Damon Briggs heard it. He sat alone in the comms chamber of a forward ops outpost orbiting Theral 2, one boot propped against the edge of the console. The message played twice. He didn't blink. He didn't move. Only when the voice ended, fading out under a rumble of structural collapse, did he speak. "Where is this from?" Malcolm Lenart's face lit the encrypted channel on the display. Behind him, analysts filtered lines of recovered telemetry. Coordinates triangulate to level 6E of the subsurface geology bay LSR, 30 meters below prior search grid. The signal bounced through a collapsed utility shaft. Took us weeks to clean it up. "Confirmed?" Briggs asked. Leonard nodded. "We sent a recon squad yesterday. They found them." Briggs straightened. "How many?" 146 engineers, 31 soldiers, some with burns, others with neuroshock exposure, but alive. They've been surviving on rations, condensation reclamation, and grit. "They thought they were abandoned," Briggs said. "They did," Leonard replied, "until they saw our patch again." Briggs leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Names?" Leonard tapped his pad. "Transmitting now. One in particular I think you'll want to see." Briggs received the file. The list loaded slowly, rows of names scrolling across the screen. Midway through, he stopped. Rain Varric. He exhaled hard through his nose. Rain had served with him during the Krellin suppression on Ada 5. Field engineer turned shock rifleman, the kind of man who smiled through chaos and built bridges while under artillery fire. Briggs had seen his helmet collapse under a plasma burst 7 years ago. Body unrecovered. Declared KIA. Now his name was on a list of the living. Briggs closed his eyes. He saw a flash, the old battlefield, trenches lit by oil fires, Varric diving across a collapsed hull to yank Briggs from a collapsing deck. "You're not allowed to die before me, damn it," Varric had shouted, blood streaming down his temple. Now, somehow, he was still out there. Briggs opened a side panel inside Baylor's cockpit and pulled out a small military-grade brush and red pigment vial. He dipped the brush, turned to the inside of the mech's forearm plating, and wrote the name in capital strokes, Varric. He wiped the brush clean. Below it, 4 other names had already been painted: Bray, Harker, Leon, Nasser. 1 per mission, 1 per redemption. He spoke into the secure channel. "From now on, after every op, we mark the living, the ones they didn't break." The War Machine deployment patterns changed. UEDF Command authorized a new directive, Operation Emberwake. Strike teams were smaller, faster, personalized. Every pilot received a fragment of the list, survivors' names etched into mission HUDs, not as objectives, but as reminders. Captain Thomas Dakarov painted 3 names onto the thigh plate of Phalanx 02 before redeploying to Quorn Ridge. Lieutenant Dresner marked his shoulder joint with a crude carving tool, gritting his teeth as he cut into the frame without guidance overlays. Each name came with a story, a connection, a reason, and something else changed. The fighting became more brutal, not careless, just unflinching. On Maris Hollow, Briggs entered a subterranean tunnel system with Baylor 66 alone, tracking an Orzal supply column. He intercepted them in a tight corridor where movement was limited. Rather than wait for clear shots, he used Baylor's reinforced limbs to physically crush the transports, torso against wall, limb against floor. The kill wasn't clean. It was deliberate. Inside the UEDF command bunker on Europa, Admiral Corbin Jourdain watched the new combat footage with narrowed eyes. Eamon Russo stood beside him. "He's not operating within grid directives anymore," Russo noted. "He's not supposed to," Jourdain replied. They watched in silence as Briggs ejected a still-living Orzal pilot from a shredded exosuit, then crushed it underfoot as it begged for mercy and fractured basic. "He's making it personal," Russo said. "It is personal," Jourdain answered, eyes still on the screen. Always was. Outside of formal briefings, a confidential communique was logged, addressed from Jourdain to Leonard. "Initiate passive name trace across all survivor data. Cross-reference with internal recon logs from pre-strike LSR footage. Confirm behavioral markers. I want full profiles on who fought, who hid, and who led. No public dissemination. This is for internal command only. The message never left the dark archive node. But Briggs received a call from Leonard later that night. "You knew?" Briggs asked, voice low. "We had to be sure," Leonard replied. "We didn't abandon them, Damon. We waited for the moment they'd be more than remembered. We wanted them avenged." Briggs didn't answer. He just ended the call and turned back to the list. The next morning, he added 2 more names after a successful raid on a relay nexus near Siren's Edge. Then he closed the panel and deployed again. He didn't speak much now. His comms were terse, efficient. But inside the war machine, something else was happening. Baylor 66, once calibrated through AI routines and combat heuristics, was now moving like it understood. During one skirmish, Briggs adjusted a servo angle mid-step to avoid crushing a human escapee fleeing the blast zone. Baylor did the correction before he finished the motion. It anticipated. Not through logic, but sync. They were no longer pilot and machine. They were weapon and wound. And for the Orzal, each encounter now carried a signature, not just of destruction, but of memory. In one ruined garrison, an Orzal corpse was found hanging upside down, a human ID badge stapled to its chest, underneath, carved deep into stone. Still alive, still angry. The message spread across Orzal command like a contagion. Their soldiers spoke of ghosts in metal, of mechs that moved without patterns, of pilots who never slept. And across every battlefield, the humans brought not orders, but names. And Briggs carried the list like scripture. The signal was faint, but it pulsed in a pattern no Orzal transmission had ever used. 3 bursts, pause, 2 short pulses, a long hold. Briggs recognized it immediately. It wasn't Orzal. It wasn't even automated. It was human, and it came from the edge of the Verloc perimeter. In the darkness of Baylor 66's cockpit, he watched the waveforms scroll. UEDF intelligence had confirmed the anomaly hours earlier, just before the deployment order. Now, in the silence before war, the scope of the mission sank in. He keyed the secure channel. "This is Briggs, standing by for confirmation." Malcolm Leonard's voice crackled through. "You're reading what we're reading. The signal mimics a war machine's signature. But there's more. It's not a beacon. It's a bleed. The kind of interference we'd expect from something trying to think too many things at once." "Go on," Briggs said. "We think it's the neural core," Leonard replied. "Not just a relay center, not even a command hub. The entire Orzal military apparatus. It's linked. The tower might be their brain." Briggs stared at the wireframe projection of the region. "And if we destroy it? Then you cut the nerve of the beast." Coordinates loaded across the squad's displays. The final offensive had been approved. No fallback, no contingency. Inside the Verloc perimeter lay the heart of the Orzal Empire, and the Orzal knew it. Thomas Takarov's voice came through first. 3 units didn't make it through last week. Full signal loss. We're going in blind." "We're not going in blind," Briggs said, tightening his harness. "We're going in angry." The strike began at 0500. 6 war machines descended through the valley, Baylor 66 at the front. The terrain was ash and stone, slagged by decades of energy warfare. Above them, clouds of electromagnetic dust spun in corrupted spirals, as if the planet itself recoiled from its inhabitants. Then the defenses woke up. Dozens of energy pylons ignited along the ridge, firing webs of pulsed light into the atmosphere. Not to destroy, but to blind. Jammers, reflective scatter arrays, radio disruption. They were walking into silence. "Keep it tight," Briggs ordered. "Eyes up. They want us separated." Phalanx 02 and Revenant 34 pushed ahead, running flank screens. The ground shuddered. A moment later, something emerged, not from above, but below. Orzal mechas, 12 meters tall, clawed and plated in dark alloy. Unlike their organic cousins, these constructs moved with brutal precision. Their limbs were jointed like the war machines. Their balance shifted like human designs. Their posture, familiar. Confirming visual, Dakharov said. That's our own gate profile. Briggs saw it too. The mech across from Baylor, taller, broader, its plating bulkier but shaped the same, raised an arm and mimicked Baylor's position. Its right shoulder carried a stylized symbol resembling the UEDF logo, scratched into place crudely, like a child tracing a stolen badge. They copied us, Briggs muttered. They didn't learn. They stole. The enemy advanced. Baylor fired first. The impact cracked through the field, splitting the closest mech's torso in half. It collapsed, smoking. But another moved in behind it. Revenant 34, engaged, only to be pierced clean through the chest by a plasma glaive, dragged down into the dirt as its pilot screamed. Static followed. Dresner's voice shouted over comms. They're syncing with each other, sharing telemetry. Then we don't give them a pattern, Briggs snapped. Move like they don't. Baylor lunged left, low, brutal, driving a shoulder into a kneeling mech and lifting it off the ground. He spun, using the momentum to hurl it into an energy pylon. The pylon exploded, sending arcs of white fire through the sky. Phalanx 02 was next to fall, hit by a projectile shaped like a harpoon. The moment it pierced armor, the mech's limbs froze. It was still standing when the internal detonation sequence ignited. Briggs ignored it. He had no time for grief. Across the ridge, a new form approached, larger than the rest. Its frame mirrored Baylor perfectly. Every joint, every actuator, even the scarred plating on its left knee, copied from a battle damage profile logged in the Krellin uprisings. It wasn't just mimicry. It was him. The Mecha Orzal elite raised its weapon, a gravity lance pulsing with energy. Its movements were too smooth. It didn't hesitate. Briggs felt a chill crawl up his spine. Briggs, Dakharov called. We'll cover you. Take it. No, Briggs replied. This one's mine. The two collided in the basin between towers. Baylor's fists slammed against armor that flexed and absorbed each strike. The enemy responded with equal brutality. Its strikes coordinated, measured, learned. Briggs pivoted under a blow, drove a plasma blade upward, but the mech twisted with a move Briggs had used himself 12 missions ago. The lance struck Baylor's side, piercing into the abdomen, severing a dozen systems. His display blinked, power bleeding. Briggs roared and shoved the mech back, yanking the lance from his own hull. It tore more than it freed. Fluid poured across the cockpit floor. No time for pain, he muttered. His targeting reticle failed. He aimed manually. The energy rifle mounted under Baylor's arm rose. No lock-on, just instinct. Briggs pulled the trigger. The round burst through the enemy's chest cavity, igniting its reactor. The mech staggered, limbs twitching, then collapsed in slow, agonized motion, its final pose mirroring Baylor's defensive stance. Briggs didn't watch it fall. He turned to the ridge. There, rising behind a nest of plasma conduits and shield towers, was the tower, the neural spire of the Orzal. Tall, narrow, metallic but alive. Pulsing with soft blue light, its surface breathed. Every enemy on the field paused. Briggs didn't. He pushed Baylor forward, step by step. Servos screaming. Sensors dead. HUD flashing black. The cockpit shook violently with every movement, systems failing in sequence. Just one more run, he growled. He rerouted all remaining power to forward thrusters. The Baylor 66's core hummed like a wounded animal, and then it sprinted, through artillery bursts, through falling debris, through the corpses of its own dead, toward the tower, and Briggs didn't stop. The cockpit was burning from the inside. Sparks danced across the shattered control panels of Baylor 66 as hydraulic lines hissed open, flooding the floor with coolant and fire suppression foam that had long since stopped working. Red emergency lights pulsed in erratic intervals, casting Damon Briggs's face in flickering shadows. Every surface vibrated. Every step forward jolted the cockpit like the inside of a falling building. The spire was less than 2 clicks away. Left actuator offline. Gyro torque failing. Baylor's system monitor coughed through fractured audio. Briggs ignored it. The diagnostic overlay had died minutes ago, and now even the fallback manual system stuttered with corrupted data. Outside, the Orzal neural tower loomed, taller than anything they'd faced. It wasn't just a structure. It was a signal, a brain, a symbol. Its surface shimmered with neural latticework, thousands of organic light strands running up its spine like veins, each pulsing with soft, rhythmic glow. It wasn't static. It pulsed, breathed, thought. Behind it, anti-orbital towers turned slowly toward Baylor, but too late. The shock of Briggs's charge had been too fast, too direct, too human. He tightened the straps over his chest. The seat harness dug into his ribs, the metal frame behind him groaning under the stress. His right leg bled openly through a fractured knee joint. He barely felt it. Alarms flashed again. Internal pressure exceeding safe threshold. Reactor casing cracked. He didn't care. His hand found the manual override. A thick lever, hidden beneath a safety panel he'd torn open with a knife 6 minutes earlier. The control gave a sharp click. The cockpit vibrated harder as Baylor's safety fail-safes disengaged one by one. Then silence. Only the thunder of footfalls remained. Every step was a countdown. Baylor 66 sprinted forward, servos shrieking, plating falling away like armor shedding for the final blow. With each bound, the war machine lost more structure. Hip panels torn, right arm locked at the elbow, power feed lines trailing like nerves torn from the bone. Briggs opened his final comm line. It wasn't encrypted. It wasn't meant to be. He spoke through gritted teeth, voice low, but hard enough to cut steel. "Let me show you dancers what a human is really for." His hand struck the final command. The ejection system activated, quiet, shielded, silent. A human-sized pod dropped from Baylor's lower core vent, masked by the heat bloom from the reactor surge. The escape vector had been plotted manually. No telemetry, just instinct and inertia. The pod launched unseen, drifting beneath radar, hidden in the wake of something far louder. Baylor 66 became a missile, a mechanical titan, ablaze from within, limbs locked into an irreversible charge. The last few meters were a blur, a roar of collapsing earth and folding metal. The neural tower loomed larger than ever, its surface shimmering like wet glass in a sunbeam. Organic conduits pulsed faster, sensing the intrusion. And then it struck. The impact shattered more than steel. There was no detonation, just a transfer of force so pure, so absolute, it rewrote the landscape. The tower didn't collapse. It imploded. The impact drove molten metal up through the ground like volcanic glass, rupturing the spinal core of the Orzal command structure. A ring of shock expanded from the base. Every neural thread lit up, then went dark. Across the continent, Orzal units convulsed in unison. Their eyes flickered, limbs locked. Voices broke into fractured gasps as the consciousness linking them shattered. Some died instantly, overload boiling their synaptic relays. Others screamed and clawed at their own heads, begging for orders that no longer came. A few simply dropped where they stood, their bodies still twitching from residual neural echoes. In orbit, 3 Orzal carriers drifted without input. Weapon systems went cold. Pilots collapsed inside their cockpits, eyes blank. Entire crews fell silent, minds collapsed into incomprehensible static. In a field west of the tower, an Orzal mechanized division stood frozen. 20 mechs awaiting orders that would never come. One by one they toppled, crashing into the dirt like statues with their bases shattered. Inside Phalanx 02, Thomas Dakharoff watched the sky ripple with shockwaves, heat blooming in rolling thunderclouds of dust and fractured atmosphere. "Briggs?" No response. Not on any channel. Dakharoff stepped down from the hatch, stood atop his war machine, and stared at the crater. Revenant 34 limped into view, smoke trailing from its side. Inside, Dressner said nothing. He was staring too. There was nothing left of Baylor. Just twisted metal. Ash. Flame. Dakharoff lowered his head. He did it. They stayed there for nearly 4 minutes, watching the neural tower's remains spark and flicker, waiting for confirmation. A signal. Anything. And then someone moved. From behind a shattered hull plate near the edge of the crater, a figure emerged, covered in soot, limping, left arm dangling useless at his side. His armor was scorched black, one boot gone, the other dragging, helmet in hand. It was Briggs, alive. He walked without speaking, body heaving with exhaustion. Grease and plasma streaked his face. One lens of his helmet was cracked clean through, a fine web of fractures catching the light like broken ice. He reached the slope where the others stood, paused, and looked out over what remained of the Orzal command. Nothing. No movement. No signal. Just the glow of smoldering alloy and the falling ash of a broken empire. Briggs raised the helmet slowly, slung it under his arm, and turned to Dakharoff. "Elisar avenged," he said, voice like stone. He looked up at the sky, clear now, for the first time in months. He exhaled. "Let's go home, guys." "Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. Hope you had a great time with the story. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really makes a huge difference to the channel. And hey, I've got something else for you. I've chosen another story that I think you'll really enjoy. Just click the card right here, or hit this one to jump into the full playlist. See you in the next one.